Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, Forrest Gump plans the great escape through historical fiction. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have two good movies, the other two bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Adam Thomas, and these are my magic shows.
And I am Thomas Mariani, and I am tunneling to get away from this park bench where Adam is talking so much about his goddamn life story. I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Whoa, boyo, let me make a tunnel. Get us out of here.
Oh, Charlie, please help me. You're the only one that can help me. Well, everybody, welcome to the Double-Edged Double Bill, where every week, if you're new, we talk about, a double feature that we picked at the end of the previous episode, based around a topic that's kind of, usually at least related to something recent that's coming out in the film world. And we, stumbled upon this topic because we had our patrons over at patreon.com/DEDBpod vote in a poll for this one. And they ended up choosing historical fiction, which relates to a couple releases that are recent. Babylon, which recently opened up a bit larger, and also Pale Blue Eye, which is in theaters right now in certain places, but it'll be on Netflix in a couple weeks. And basically, historical fiction is, this is per the definition, at least I found for it, is stories related to real past events and or people that are overall fictitious. Which I'll just state right now, one of our choices I think might not technically fit that definition.
No, but I mean, there are real things that happen in it. So, I mean, it skirts the line, but I think hey, we'll give it a pass.
Yeah, but I think at least for many things we'll say about the bad pick, that one technically fits historical fiction more, which is to say, like, basically, in a story where it's like, it takes place in a past time frame, and it follows a character who isn't real, but they might stumble upon, like, real events, or they might stumble upon real people in history, which I think is interesting as, like, a fun, like, idea for especially, even though in a modern world, sort of like that line of like what is fiction, what is reality kind of thing as that continues forward. At the same time, I think it's fun to like kind of have these stories where it's like, let's play with history a bit, where we have a character kind of like stumbling along. I think that can work in the right context.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Sometimes they really work for me, but when they're bad, and especially the ones that sort of go along with what you're talking about, like I can think of a couple. I think you're going to name one of them later, potentially. But when they're bad, they're so bad. Like Pride and Prejudice zombies and things like that. You're like, oh, God, this is just awful shit.
Right, I mean, the genre ones kind of are dicey, but for every one of those, there's also some, like, Ababa Hotep, which I think is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it takes the basic idea of, like, this thing in history where it's like, this famous figure died, but it's like, but what if there's this alternate path where what history actually is kind of like skewed a bit. Nothing else like that sort of alternate history and like future stuff I actually really like. That kind of like, speculative fiction of like what could happen in the universe where like this slight thing changed.
Yeah, sure. Whatever, man. I don't know.
Look, it's the end of the year. Adam's very tired.
I'm exhausted. There's no question.
Well, why don't we go ahead and jump in then with the two picks we picked at the end of our last episode, which, by the way, you weren't here for, Adam, so welcome back.
Yeah, thanks.
But we're...
I didn't mean to sound as negative about that as I did.
You're exhausted. I get it. It's fine. We gotta start talking about these movies here, Adam. But we picked at the end of the last episode the good pick, which was one of your choices, The Great Escape, which we'll talk about first, and then my bad pick, that might be a hot take for some people, but we'll get into it, about Forrest Gump. But first, let's start off with The Great Escape.
Put 500 prisoners of war in a maximum security camp. Give up your hopeless attempts to escape.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits. Meanwhile, we dig.
The Germans put all their rotten eggs in one barbed wire basket, and they hatched the most ingenious escape plan in the history of war.
Sedgwick, manufacturer. Griff, as I said, Taylor. Nimon, Hames, diversions.
Which one's the forgery?
They both are.
Hold on to yourself, Bartlett. You're 20 feet short.
The hole is right here in the open. The guard is between us and the lights.
The great escape from a barbed wire camp to a barbed wire country. No tools, no clothes, no credentials, no way out. Yet they made the great escape.
So The Great Escape came out July 4th, 1963, from director John Sturges, which is based on the nonfiction book by Paul Brickhill, who was apparently part of this actual true story, in which, if you're unaware, this takes place during World War II and is about a bunch of prisoners in a prisoner of war camp called Stalag Luft 3, which is in Germany, where basically 76 men end up escaping from this camp. Spoilers for real events. 50 of them were killed, 23 were taken back to the camp, and 3 end up managing to escape. So a lot of that sort of like the through line of the story, including like how they built like various tunnels to try and escape and all that stuff, that's all very true. Like all of like the sort of outline of the story is very true, but there are a lot of fictions within the margins, particularly that there are 3 major American characters in this movie, as opposed to there was only 1 American at this camp. It was mostly like British and Australian prisoners.
Yeah. And none of them were as cool as James Coburn or Bronson. But no, that's the thing about this movie is the cast is kind of insane. Like, it's kind of one of the greatest, like, of the era ensemble casts, like, ever. Not only do you got McQueen and Coburn and Bronson, but then you got, Richard Attenborough, you got Pleasance, I mean, it's just nonstop, man. It's fucking crazy. And this is also one of those movies that has permeated sort of the pop culture zeitgeist so much to where if you've never seen the movie, you've probably heard the theme or seen a popular television show like The Simpsons or something like that do a take on it with the theme. It's happened so many times.
Right, to the point where I had not seen this movie before. We did it for the show here. But at the same time, I recognize, like, obviously the Elmer Bernstein theme, as you mentioned, is, like, very iconic, has been put everywhere. But even, like, in The Simpsons, there's that great episode where it's Maggie escaping the daycare center that, like, parodies certain bits of this movie, like, shot for shot. Like, it's particularly, like, the ball bouncing against the wall and stuff like that, which, even aside of The Simpsons, I'd seen that parodied so many other times. Like, even Chicken Run. Chicken Run is basically like a parody of this fucking movie.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, of course, sweet. This makes so much more sense than the movie I saw when I was a child. But yeah, so Adam, though, this was your pick. And so is this one that you grew up with? Was this one that you really loved? And does it still hold up for you?
Yeah, I definitely grew up with it. It was definitely one of those ones that, like, my dad loved. And anytime it would be on, because it was on a lot. It probably, I don't have cable anymore, but this was like a Turner Classic Movie thing all the time. And so I've seen it quite a few times. I remember more getting enjoyment out of it because my dad liked it so much, and let my dad like explain to me who Steve McQueen was, and Coburn and all these guys, and what they've done before, and just sort of the legend of Steve McQueen, especially as the ultra man's man and all that stuff. So it was kind of a fun bonding experience with that. But then as I got older and watched it, probably like, I don't know, early high school days, to really sit there and watch it and sort of try to take it in. I think it was even for drama class. And yeah, I really, really liked it. I was kind of blown away by it. Especially because, and I know it sounds silly, but Richard Attenborough looking the way he does in this movie, like that is so, it's bizarre to me because it doesn't look like either like he was young. No, I really liked it then. Obviously, like I said, the Steve McQueen stuff, but the motorcycle stunt alone is still impressive. Um, but after going back, and to be fully transparent, I wasn't able to completely rewatch it this time. Just flu, work, Christmas stuff, all that stuff. It kind of prevented me from getting it done.
I can't believe you couldn't fit a 3-hour movie into that schedule, Adam. I mean,
Two of them.
One of them's like 220. This one is like 3 hours long.
The 221 feels like 520. But it from what I was able to recatch I was really happy and excited by it. But it makes me like, as soon as I get the free time, like potentially even Christmas Day, when everything's done, I might finish it then, because I really really enjoyed it and it gave me a nice sense of nostalgia, and also just sort of a appreciation for how movies were made back then. That's the one thing you can say about this: movies don't get made like this anymore in this style and just this huge cast, where it doesn't feel like a big Hollywood thing. Like, this doesn't feel like a big, like, cash grab Hollywood movie. It feels like they made the movie they wanted to tell, not, oh, you're gonna see it because look who's in it. Oh yeah, it's their big comeback movie or some bullshit like that. It's just a genuinely fun and exciting movie. And it's weird too that a movie like this, about what it's about, that they gave it that sort of little bit of a comedic tone to some of it, and it really works. It doesn't feel off to me, whereas sometimes that can really go against the movie. But I'd argue that it really works in favor on this one.
Yeah, there's enough like levity and stuff. It feels like once again, my first impression of it, this being the first time I ever just watched the whole movie and didn't say watch Leonardo DiCaprio get deep faked into it in like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or whatever. Seeing the whole movie, it is truly like a great crowd pleaser that still really works even from like a modern perspective. I think it's because like they have that levity that you mentioned in there, and I think it's because despite how like in theory like big like The Great Escape and how like massive in theory this could be, it's a very intimate story about like a group of men who are stuck in this place against their will and trying to like even leave, not because they like have any hope of like actually getting out. Like I watched a little documentary that included some of the actual escapees or like prisoners that were involved in this, the based on a true story element of this. And they talked about the fact that like so much of this wasn't even based on like, oh, we're gonna get out of this, as much as like we wanted to cause this chaos. Like Attenborough even talks about that at one point in this movie, about like we are mainly here to kind of have some kind of disruption that can help even a little bit with our guys actually fighting in World War II at this time. So it's not even like, oh, we're actually going to escape and be free. It's just like, we need to cause chaos because fuck these guys. It's a movie about like patriotic trolling, basically.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, well, you got to figure too, because when you really think about it, like, say these guys do get out, right? And obviously it really happened in real life, but in the context, like, just to think like we're all going to escape, we're all going to get away, we're all going to be fine. I mean, the chances of that happening are slim to none. So, really, yeah, fuck them. Just make them uncomfortable. Down with the system. Anarchy, anarchy. Uh, you, you know, hack the planet. Oh God, but no, it's just because what else you got? And that's kind of the sense you get. What else you got? You're stuck in this place, like you said, in a prison, a war prison. So fuck it, fuck it. Ruin their day. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think like what really helps is also the fact that all of it also feels kind of like low stakes for like that element of it, but even like with the guy who's running the prison, the German officer, he's trying to make this kind of like a, oh, I know this is bullshit. Like, I'm not a big fan of like what the Nazis are necessarily doing at this time anyway, so how about we all just stay chill and we'll garden and we'll treat you decently and all that, and this can all be like calm and peaceful. But just the rage that builds up, we're just like, no, we're not gonna make this easy for you, dude. Fuck you, we're prisoners here. This isn't a fucking vacation. This is me being imprisoned in this dumb camp. We're not gonna be on like friendly terms with this.
I mean, right. Of course. I agree with you. That is one of my favorites movies. It's like, oh, I know, look, sorry to be the bearer of the bad news type of asshole that everybody has at work. It's just like,
so look, this is like the guys up top. This isn't me. I'm like, we're buddies, right? Like, I'm the assistant to the regional manager, not the main
I'm just
guy.
doing my job here too, buddy.
I was only following orders, perhaps, is what they might say.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Perhaps that would be said. But yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. Just obviously in the setting of what it is. But of course, yeah, fuck that guy. Fuck you, man. I'm about to piss in your cereal. Like, not literally. Well, maybe literally. I don't know. It'd be a horrible situation to be in.
I mean, that's a real disruptor move to do that.
It is really disruptive. I agree. It is a disruptor move. Yeah, I see what you did. Yeah, I don't know. But how do you feel about sort of the main leads in this. How do you feel like Steve McQueen does?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because like McQueen is somebody who I just mostly know as like a Hollywood figure. Like the only
Right.
McQueen movies I've seen besides this one are Magnificent Seven,
Of course.
which was also directed by Sturges, The Blob, and The Towering Inferno. So like that's
Ooh.
all of my basis for who McQueen is basically in terms of actually seeing the
Well.
movies.
You got to watch Bullet.
That's been on the watch list along with The Great Escape, so one down, another one to go. Yeah, with him, it's so fascinating because like he has this great, like obviously when I've seen clips of this movie and him in particular, like the motorcycle stuff and all that, he's one of those guys where it's like, oh my god, he's like the ultimate badass. He's so cool. He's so slick, and he is those things. But I love how in context of the movie, he's like kind of like the lone fuck up dude. Who's off to the side, like, yeah, you all are planning like some big thing with the tunnels, whatever the fuck. I don't care. I'm doing my own thing. I'm a rebel. I'm not playing by your rules.
He's kind of a dummy,
Right.
and it really works for him. I agree. That's why I love Steve McQueen. You know, he's Steve McQueen. But yeah, that's the part about his character in this I really love too, where it's simply because of sort of his brawn and I guess he would, or his daredevil-esque attitude that he gets through. Because if not, he's kind of a fuck up.
Right, but what I like also at the same time, it's kind of like he's the missing ingredient for like what everybody's doing over there, and vice versa. Where like Attenborough like tries to get him to help out, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna do my own thing. That's cool." And McQueen fucks up by trying to do that, and at the same time, they also fuck up without McQueen. So I love the added element. Just like, well, why don't we just collaborate together? It's like we built the tunnel. You go through it and help us get out of here. And it's like, I like that it's kind of like a weird impasse thing where it's like, well, if everyone is going to get out of here, if we can get the originally planned 250 men out of here, we need you to help us out. And I like that, especially by the time it gets to like the actual escape. And McQueen's like the first one to like pop his head out like a gopher. And then helps like the few people that are able to get out. It works for just like, oh, there's actually a sense of like camaraderie that kind of happens there. Not we're going to be best friends forever, but like we are people in desperate need of each other. So let's get us out of the situation as quickly as possible.
Right. And, you know, again, I know I said at the very top of the discussion, but this fucking cast, like everybody in it works very, very well.
That's the thing is like McQueen is great, but he's not my favorite. My favorites in this movie are Garner and Pleasance. I love that
Pleasance is
relationship.
fucking great. Yeah, they're great. Yeah, those two are great together.
But even like Garner, I just love is like he's the guy who basically is like, oh, I'm the scrounger, and he has like, which was actually a true thing where they actually had people who would like scrounge about like, oh, hey Germans, you want to like maybe get a bit of coffee, some chocolate. You like all that, right? It's like, ooh, this is good night. And then he was able to, like, give him that, basically. They come from the land of chocolate, of course, that's why. But his whole thing where it's just, like, he's the guy who's, like, instantaneously, like, trying to help anybody out. He's, like, very courteous, very respectful of everybody. And then he just sees Pleasance as, like, a poor, wounded animal. Literally, like, blinded, like, in a tragic sense. And, like, him trying to help him out throughout that whole thing, like, that last third of the movie is like so emotionally like really palpable where it's just like, oh, it's just endearing, like he wants to help this dude out who's like at a pathetic state. And it really works, especially all the stuff when like it's him, Attenborough, and Pleasance, and like Pleasance is trying to hide the fact that he's been blind, and he's like, oh look, I'll get that pin over there, right? That's what you want. He's been practicing it this whole time. And it's like, well, come back over this way, and the foot comes out. It's like, oh no, it ain't gonna fucking work out for Pleasance. It's so tragic. I love all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think you'd already know who my favorite is in it without even really having to say it, just because it's who it is.
I wonder, is it maybe someone who we would usually see as a very stoic, emotionless robot, but here actually has like an emotional journey that I was shocked to believe in?
What are you talking about, man? Come on.
I don't know, I just wish I could name it.
Yeah, you're right. No, he's fucking great at it, man. It's probably his best. I mean, honestly, I love Charles Bronson in pretty much anything, but this is probably, at least from what I've seen, some of his best work for sure. He's not just the mechanic or the guy from Death Wish. He does have a real arc to him, and you really kind of like get behind his character, and he's super important to the plot. So I mean, yeah, it's just probably Charles Bronson's best work.
Yeah, and shout out to, I forgot who the guy is who's like his buddy throughout the whole movie, actually helps out with the claustrophobia and stuff like that. But their friendship is also really endearing, especially like the whole scene where he's gonna try and like, I can't go in the tunnel anymore, so I'm gonna like try and go over the fence. And there's that whole scene where it's like the guy's trying to get Bronson back, and he's like, no, come back! What are you doing? We can't do that. What are you doing, you fucking idiot? You gotta come back here. Like, that whole scene is so well choreographed. And then, like I said, the scenes where Bronson is talking, like, actually going through the claustrophobia, it genuinely feels, like, emotional in a weird way where I'm just like, I just don't expect it from that dude being so stone-faced all the time. But yeah, it's a very tremendous performance, I would agree. Though I would say my favorite Bronson is a bit later in Once Upon a Time in the West. I think that's just like the perfect use of Bronson
that's
in anything.
pretty perfect Bronson. Yeah,
Fucking dope. Yeah. And by the way, shout out, the guy I'm referring to is John Leeton as Willie, who is like Bronson's cohort and ends up escaping. One of the few actual escapees of the Great Escape. Though you mentioned earlier, of course, Coburn with that terrible Australian accent. Like, such a bad Australian fucking accent. But he's fucking cool, so I don't care how bad it is.
James Coburn.
Yeah.
James Coburn is he's just awesome. But yeah, that accent is egregious. Like, what are they thinking?
To the point where I'm just like, wait, so was he actually one of like the South African guys in the real story, or was he like British, or is he Australian? Like, it morphs between all those three, but at the same time, the whole time he's in that camp, you're instantaneously just like, oh no, he's like one of the cooler guys here, particularly when like he's leaving and he's like, why you got that big ass suitcase? You're not gonna get that out of there. Just like, I'll take my chances. And he leaves with the suitcase. And I love that even too, that like the actual titular escape happens about like 2/3 of the way through this movie. So the last third is just that whole, like, slow realization of, like, most of these guys are going to either get murdered or get back to the camp. And I love, like, all the tension that's there with, like, Richard Attenborough and his buddy when they're, like, trying to get on the bus and stuff like that. Just like, let's play it cool, let's play it calm. And how it works so many times. There's, like, so many close calls. And it's like, woof, everything's good. And then he gets fucked over by the thing he tried to warn another guy about. We're just like, oh, no, don't respond to English. That catches everybody all the time. And then he does it at the end, like, oh, no! They set it up and he got fucked by that same thing he was warning people against.
Yeah. That's the thing about this movie, too. Clocking in at 3 hours or whatever, 2 hours, 52 minutes, or, whatever it is. It doesn't feel like it, though. Like,
no,
it's long, but does feel pretty brisk, which says a lot, That says a lot for storytelling in general, or screenplay and sort of the way the film's done and acted and everything like that, to where you can have that much content, and especially like compared to nowadays, like we're used to that, and it even feels shorter than modern movies that are clocking in at damn near 3 hours. I can imagine it felt shorter than fucking Avatar.
Though at the same time, I do get how, like, watching this, like, I realize why it was such like a big, especially like you mentioned, Turner Classic Movies kind of staple, where it's like, it feels like the ideal way to watch this movie is like 4 hours long with about an hour of commercials sprinkled between, so you can like leave, get a drink, go to the bathroom or whatever. That feels like kind of like the best way necessarily watch it on like a lazy Sunday afternoon kind of thing. It feels like perfect for that, like that kind of bygone age that honestly isn't here anymore. With, like, as you mentioned, like, most people cut cable. But still, even in, like a modern context, it still really works. You get immersed. I think it especially works because it's so clearly divided with, like, the first third is planning the escape. The second third is, like, either trying or succeeding in the escape. And that third is literally, like, either people actually getting home scot-free, getting strung back, or being horribly executed. Like, the whole scene where Attenborough and, like, 50 men end up getting, like, shot like that. And it's one of those things where you know what's going to happen. Even I didn't know, like, the whole historical context of this, but the moment, like, the guy's like, oh, hey, why don't you come out and stretch your legs? I'm like, oh, no, they're going to get fucked. Oh, this is bad. Oh, no. Not Richard Attenborough. Not him.
Who will have that spicy conversation with Mr. DNA now? Oh, no.
Who will have that conversation with himself and awkwardly fumble through his cue cards?
No! No! Damn you Nazis!
And even, like, that's also the case even with, like, McQueen, where, like, I knew about that whole motorcycle chase, which is so awesome in this movie, where, like,
it's fucking
is, like,
great.
Flanked at various different sides, but even the fact that, like, he does all those, like, badass jumps and all that stuff, it's like, oh, this is so cool, and then he gets, like, caught in the barbed wire, and he's fucked, and it's like, oh, no, even he can't get away. Oh, no. All is lost.
Yeah, I know, and, that motorcycle jump is still considered one of the greatest stunts ever on screen, and I mean, it holds up, dude. It's still pretty fucking thrilling and impressive. Like, it's definitely, but I do think that's probably, I mean, with people without even knowing it, for the most part, have seen that. I mean, it's constantly whenever you watch anything like an award ceremony or everything, they show clips from Hollywood's past or cinema's greatest moments or whatever. That's usually always on there.
Even the stock image of McQueen on that motorcycle, like in front of the barbed wire on like the hill and stuff like that. That's sort of like the stock image of him I've seen in many places.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere. Yeah, for sure. If it's not that, it's the picture from the Bullet poster usually.
But at the same time, like what I like also is like it doesn't feel like one of those movies where like, oh, I've seen parodies, therefore I feel like I've seen the whole movie. Because there's certain elements that there were certain elements I discovered watching it for the first time that I loved. Like there's my favorite sequence probably in the whole movie is the bit where they create the moonshine out of potatoes, and then they do like their little like 4th of July like. There comes the colonies are coming in and they're like making peace with the British folks and stuff like that. It's really charming, and then leads into that incredibly depressing, like, oh, they discovered one of the tunnels, I believe Tom. But the whole thing with McQueen's like little British buddy, and how he gets like, oh, I'm like hope is lost, so I'm gonna try and jump, and then he gets shot down horribly. Another great like all is lost moment that just came from a really exciting, riveting, like fun bonding moment between all these guys, where it's just like, hey, we're gonna come together and like drink moonshine, and it's like, oh no, we can't even have that.
To be fair, that specific bonding experience never ends well. A bunch of dudes hanging out drinking potato moonshine together. It's not going to end well. No matter what era where you are, you're fucked.
Well, especially prison potato moonshine, I'm sure, is even worse than it would be in other circumstances.
Made in the toilets. Ugh.
Yeah, shout out, by the way, that's Ives is that guy who ends up getting shot. Who is like tremendous, like especially early on when he's talking between the prison cells with McQueen as he's doing like the baseball thing and everything, and to Angus Lenny is that character. And he's like such the perfect like small short king dude who I'm just like, oh, I want that guy to get out of here. He's so great. He's so like a little charming pipsqueak of a man. I hope he gets out of here. It's like, nah, he can't. It's a bummer. But like even when we get to the ending of the movie and we have like all those guys come back, I love the fact that they kind of like bond even over the fact that it's like, well, a bunch of our men died. It was really horrible and upsetting, but at least the commandant get kicked out and like we caused a disruption like Richard Attenborough kind of wanted. So like, you know what? We did something. I kind of love that where it's like even that weird kind of like ennui of a like mixed bag, bittersweet ending where it's like we didn't succeed in our ultimate goal, but we did something. There was some kind of like disruption progress made.
Well, yeah, it's bonding and joint failure, I mean, they didn't achieve exactly what they wanted, but there's still some kind of satisfaction to be had by all these guys who actually survived. And it's a very common thing, because it's like you see it all the time in movies or even in life, but this one does really do it well, especially given the circumstance. Like, yeah, you might not have gone the full distance of where you wanted to go, but your little detour might have got you somewhere pretty cool too. So there's some bonding in that to where it's like, yeah, we failed, but we still fucked these guys' days up. So fuck it.
Yeah, that kind of camaraderie and just like we stuck it to the man. We ain't a part of their system. We're adults. But like in a really genuine, sincere way.
This ain't my dad. This is a cell phone.
Cell phone. I love that part when Steve McQueen did that and he threw his baseball on the ground. And then it bounced against the wall. But also, I just want to give a shout out to with Sturgis. I just love the way this movie looks. I think particularly with like the sort of geography we get of the camp and like the production design and the all the elements where just like you get a sense of just like every little detail, especially as like the escape plans end up getting screwed over. You really get a sense of like, oh my god, are they going to get out of this kind of stuff? And like especially the bit when they discover the Tom tunnel and it's like, oh, the guy pours a bit on the little part of the floor and it's like, wait a minute, it's not seeping through, like what's happening, what's going on, and they discover it. It's just like it all works where like everything is perfectly like set up and paid off in really interesting ways.
But yeah, I mean, this guy could direct the hell out of a movie, like you said, Great Escape, but Magnificent Seven even. I mean, how iconic are the shots and things in that movie as well. I'd say he knew what he was doing.
Bold takes, John Sturgis fans over here. We stan Sturgis.
Yeah. We're speaking at the Sturgis. We thought it was a Sturgis director sort of rally. It just turns out to be a bunch of dirty bikers. But we're still going to go down there and talk about him.
No, well, I thought everyone was going to be in the Eagle Has Landed cosplay here. I guess not.
So, anyways, Magnificent Seven, get off the stage, pussy.
Well, Adam, we have a whole nother movie that I think we're going to talk about quite a bit. So let's go ahead and get into our final thoughts here on The Great Escape.
I mean, like I said, it's iconic for a reason. It's one of those that has sort of permeated itself in pop culture forever, and in film and Hollywood and movie making, acting, all that stuff. It is genuinely bona fide a classic, not a cult classic, not not discovered gem. This would be considered one of those where it's a classic of Hollywood, and for a very good reason. I mean, and it still holds up. People still, you just saw it, you really liked it. It's got staying power, and I'm imagining it'll always be that.
It's not one of those where it's like, oh, it has this classic status, and like I feel that it's been put on sort of like a weird pedestal and we've kind of moved beyond it necessarily. I think it's still like a rousing, fun time, and I think it still like would work for like a modern audience as like just one to like get invested and embrace, not just for like the pop culture references, but even just on its own terms. It's a really interesting movie, and even though, like we mentioned, doesn't quite fit into like the sort of historical fiction element of this, at the same time, the stuff that is fictional adds a completely different context that like still works for, I guess, more of the spirit of like the actual true story, based on my limited knowledge, admittingly, based on like the documentary and a few bits of reading I did. But like Steve McQueen is an entirely fictional character. Like that character does not exist in the real true story or anything like that. But at the same time, like as a lot of people in that documentary even mentioned, even the real people were just like, I don't know, but it's fucking Steve McQueen being really cool. So like I get why they put that in here. I get it. And it's like it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's a great example of like sort of classic 60s era filmmaking in particular that still, holds up quite well to this day, I would say. But now, Adam, let's talk a bit about a much more recent film in context that has still permeated for various different reasons. Let's talk about Forrest Gump.
Now on DVD.
Mom always said there's an awful lot you can tell about a person by their shoes. I've worn lots of shoes. Mama said they'd take me anywhere.
Of all the places Forrest Gump has been, there's one place he hasn't. On DVD.
Run, Forrest, run!
Now, one of the most beloved motion pictures of all time is available on DVD for the first time. The Forrest Gump Special Collector's Edition.
My name's Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump.
What's my destiny, Mom?
You're gonna have to figure that out for yourself.
Winner of 6 Academy Awards, including Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Picture.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
The Forrest Gump Special Collector's Edition. Coming home for the first time on DVD. Buy it today.
So, Forrest Gump came out July 6, 1994, about 31 years almost to the day after The Great Escape, from director Robert Zemeckis, written by Eric Roth, based on the novel Forrest Gump by Winston Groom. And some of you out there might be curious as to why I would have picked this for a bad pick. Because, admittingly, this is a very popular movie. It grossed $678 million, which at the time made it like the third highest grossing movie of all time. And now it's like more in like the top 150, but still a shit ton of money. And it was nominated for like 13 Academy Awards, one for like Best Picture and Director. Tom Hanks won Best Actor, and it's the only time like someone has won an acting award like twice in a row, because he had won for Philadelphia the last year previously. And it's a movie that has like a lot of cultural staying power. A lot of people in my family like love this movie. Like my sisters love this movie. My parents like introduced me to this movie, and for a while I grew up loving Forrest Gump. That's just like, oh, this is obviously one of the great films ever made. I just kind of like fed into that kind of thing that a lot of people who were like raised in like the 90s and the 2000s kind of like fed into with this movie. And then around when I was in college, I started hearing a lot of the sort of backlash against it. And I was like, oh, do I want to revisit that movie? I don't know if I can now, with a lot of like that stuff. I don't know if I want to like have that tarnished. And then a couple years ago, I finally rewatched it for the first time in like over at least a decade. And I had much more negative thoughts than I had previously about this. But Adam, you've mentioned to me several times off mic that you have been a hater of Forrest Gump from day one.
That is correct, sir. since it came out. As I've talked about on this show several times, I cannot stand movies that are just their only thing they have about them is being emotionally manipulative. I don't. I understand, tearjerker movies and things like that, but they usually, have something sort of else going with it. This, to me, doesn't have that. To me, this is just a whole bunch of stupid fucking filler mixed with moments that it's supposed to be like, but look, it's sad. People are crying. Or, oh man, do you remember when this happened? Oh, I just feel this movie is fucking garbage. I can't stand his accent. I feel that it is just sort of a way to look at, America through rose-colored glasses. I think it's very shitty about the sort of AIDS epidemic, about race relations. Look, the way they sprinkle in those horrible fucking jokes when he's running. It happens. What the shit? Yup. And then shit happens above it. And then wipes his face and it's the smiley face. It's so fucking stupid. It's so Look, man, this movie just fucking blows big time, all right? Like, hey, Haley Joel Osment, cute little kid. All right, cool. The rest of this, terrible. Terrible, terrible movie. I don't like. I can appreciate some parts of it. Like I think Gary Sinise is actually acting his balls off in this movie. Not to say a lot because it's also like a really shitty way to look at paralyzed people. At least in my opinion, I'm not paralyzed, but to me it just feels sort of objectifying in a really crass and cruel way. I don't. I've never understood it. I remember when it came out, and I was so shocked that it won Best Picture. So I mean, I knew it was going to be nominated, but I'm like, it's not that good. Come on, it's not that good. And even Tom Hanks winning Best Actor, like I love Tom Hanks. He's a fucking, he's a national treasure. But good God, this reminds me of like a modern day, like Green Book would be its modern day equivalent, to where they knew what they were doing with this movie. We're going to make this movie. It's going to get the Oscar because of what it is, and that's it. That's all the care that went into it. At least that's what it feels like for me.
I mean, I don't know. In a world where Driving Miss Daisy is like 5 years before this and is much more of like a Green Book analog, like nearly beat for beat, I'd say that slightly deserves that more. But at the same time, with this movie, like what I find fascinating is you mentioned like all the saccharine stuff, but really like as I've gone back to it, it's fascinating because it is like all these saccharine moments are there, and that's what most people respond to. But then it's also an incredibly cynical movie that has like certain satiric bits that like make sense for like Robert Zemeckis has a lot more sort of like cynical bite in him than people give him credit for. With like if you watch especially like his '80s output, like Used Cars, even the Back to the Future movies, have a lot of that like biting satiric intent with what they're doing. And this movie I think has moments of that, but then it's mixed up with the saccharine stuff. And it just feels weird where, like, the way I would describe this movie is, like, imagine if, like, a Mad Magazine parody of Americana was illustrated by, like, Alex Ross, the comic book guy who did, like, Kingdom Come and stuff like that. It looks like gorgeous, beautiful, statuesque, like, amazing, wide open, like, beautiful landscapes and stuff like that of America. But it's written like it's a satire. So it's like, I don't know what it's going for. It feels like so bizarrely tonally confused in a modern context where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're trying to say, man. Are you trying to say like, man, wasn't American history like filled with so much turmoil but we got over it? Or, oh, America was filled with so much turmoil and the only person who could succeed is this idiot, but we also have so much investment in this idiot as like an actual sincere character. So it's like, I don't know what the fuck you're trying to do, man. What are you trying to say?
Yeah, I guess that's a very good way to look at it. What is the point? You got this character sort of gliding through all these major moments in history, in American history, especially, obviously. And to what sort of resolve? Like, I don't understand the point. Okay, yeah, he's in Vietnam. Okay, he played on the Olympics ping pong team. Okay, he's met the president twice. Okay, so what? That's the thing. It doesn't mean anything to the character in general. Like he doesn't. It's not like at the end of the movie he's learned some big life lesson from going through all these things. That doesn't happen. The whole thing is, oh, he got to be with Jenny, and oh, he's got his son. That's it. What did Forrest learn through all of these things? He ran for what was it, like a year and a half or whatever. So nothing comes from anything in this movie.
Right, and apparently, like, what I've heard is, like, the Winston Groom novel is apparently much more, like, bitingly satiric. Like, it's not as, like, Forrest Gump is not, like, this sweet, an empathetic character who you're supposed to feel invested in. He's a bit more like gruff, and it's a bit more about how like, oh, of course, like this idiot is the only person who like does everything that he's told and keeps going throughout this life, and he's the only person who can succeed in America because he's an idiot who doesn't question anything. And like that would be in theory like the satiric tone I think it's kind of going for at points. But then the opposite thing is what you're talking about, where it's just like, isn't this guy a nice guy who like lived through all the great moments in America, like all this turmoil, but also all these like great happy moments that like you feel invested in because you love Americana, right? So like you love Forrest Gump by proxy. It feels like it's this weird movie that's both an anti-American movie and a total propaganda piece. And it's just like so bizarre, where it's just like Forrest doesn't change, but at the same time the movie isn't trying to say like, isn't that fucked up, as much as it is just like, oh man, it's weird, like Forrest just kind of like flies around like the feather, and that's great, and he lived happily ever after. And Jenny died because she was trying to be counterculture. How dare you question things, Jenny?
You're right, exactly.
Like,
how dare you, hippie? 1,000%. No, I definitely feel more of the propaganda angle, the Kennedy shit, and then LBJ and all this. And oh, look, they're laughing with them. LBJ's laughing with him because he got shot in the butt in the war we had no business being in, man.
It feels like it's this weird thing where like a lot of like 90s culture has this, where it's just like this weird apathy about anybody giving a shit. Like that's what it weirdly is. Just like they have like the people who are like sort of like very pro-American who like end up getting like screwed over too at the same time in this movie. But the movie's sort of central character, like Forrest Gump, is this guy who has like no feelings about anything, and the movie is almost pushing this like, well, that's the way to be. Like, you can't get tied on like one side or the other. There's no point in this, man. You can just go down the middle and coast through life and everything's fine. You don't have to like really give a shit about anything except for like somebody who you like are chasing after, basically.
Just do what you're told, man. Everything will work out. Just listen to your parents, join the military, fight for your country. You're going to be fine. You're going to be totally fine. And you'll talk to these random people at different intervals on a bus stop, and they're all going to get super involved in your bullshit. Fuck you, movie.
I gotta say, where like you mentioned Hanks earlier, as like I will say, in terms of like I don't like necessarily the accent. I agree. I think it's a weird thing where also like Forrest Gump, they don't ever technically say has like any kind of specific mental disability. They just say he's slow, quote unquote, basically.
That's why it's insulting. That's why it's a blanket statement. Like, what is it? What do you mean he's just slow? Like, I get maybe back in the day, like when he would have been diagnosed, okay, maybe that's how things were handled back then. But still, it's insulting.
Right, but like at the same time, what I will appreciate is that like despite like all of these like all these sort of issues that would like I think screw over some of the other people who were considered, like Sean Penn, Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, and your favorite Adam, John Travolta, was almost Gump. You could imagine a worse world where that happened. I'm sure you would love this movie even more.
But in a way, though, I almost wish it was John Travolta, because this movie would not have gotten nearly as much of attention.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could you imagine Sean Penn? Holy Christ, what a dark movie. Like, it's so much darker.
But what I'm saying with, like, in terms of, like, you know, with
the Hanks of it all?
Hanks, at the same time, is, like, so good an actor that he can't help but make certain moments work. Like, a moment that gets circulated all the time, when he first sees Haley Joel Osment. It's a genuinely great piece of acting.
It's fucking amazing. No, it's amazing. I absolutely agree with you. It's amazing. And the way he could bust out the tears when he's at her grave. It's another great acting scene. That's the thing. He has these moments. I mean, it's Tom Hanks. He's undeniable. But it's saddled around it just with so much other dumb bullshit around it. You know, I had so many Dr. Peppers. You know, I gotta pee. I believe this. I believe this man has to go pee. Like, get the fuck out. This is so dumb. This is so dumb.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Is John F. Kennedy in the room right now? And he looks like a weird, like, not at all CG monstrosity version of himself?
Right, yeah. His mouth is doing totally normal, natural things.
He doesn't look like a jib jab.
It does look like a jib jab. I wish you a Merry Christmas.
He said dance with Forrest in the Oval Office. But like I think like that stuff like holds up like a fine milk. But I will say also, you mentioned like I think Sinise is great, but also the leg stuff with Lieutenant Dan still is like pretty impressive for like.
It looks
special.
really good. Like it still really looks good. And his physical acting. You know, like when he's hoisting himself up in the chair and stuff. Like he's really going for it, man.
And you feel the most earnest for him because he's the one person that like question anything with Gump, like right after the dumb Dick Cavett bit where they do like the John Lennon Imagine, just like no possessions, like that dumbass joke. He leaves and then see Lieutenant Dan's like outside to meet him, and he's just like, they gave you the goddamn Medal of Congressional Honor. Well, whoop-de-fucking-do. Don't I love America? He's like the one guy who like is able to question all this stuff and gets a happy ending, but only after, like we mentioned, going through all sorts of horrible shit this whole time. Like being just completely shit on and spat upon. And then Gump is just like, well, you should be like me, Lieutenant Dan. It's like, you know what? I guess like it's such a tragic story where by the end it's just like, I just gotta embrace the Gump of it all, and then I'll have a wife and legs. It's so fucked up.
Good for him. Oh, and he's got legs that are made out of the same stuff that, you know, they make the rockets out of. Oh, God. Like, it's so fucking dumb and forced. Like, it should be a moment. You should be like, oh, fuck yeah, Lieutenant Dan. But instead, you're like, oh, Forrest, you got new legs, Lieutenant Dan. Because he's banging somebody. Like, fuck off, Forrest. Way to ruin the moment. it's
well, look, if there's one person who knows how to ruin moments, it's Forrest Gump with, like, early on the scene with Jenny, which I'm still baffled that, like, I watched this movie many times as a child, and there is a premature ejaculation joke in this movie that's very blatant, and I never got what that was until, like the last couple times. I'm like, what?
When I first saw this as a kid, I had no idea. Obviously, yeah. I was like, yeah, this came out, 94, so I was like 11, maybe 12. And I was like, what happened? You know, I didn't know. And then I think my dad told me, what do you mean what happened? He came. I'm like, oh, what? Like, and so, but yeah, then it's like, and he did it like her roommate's robe. And he's like, I think I'll ruin your room, but it's fine, I'll wash it. Like, oh, good Lord. And this poor woman's laying there hearing all this. Like, awful. But that, and then like, with his mom, Sally Field, who's also really fun in this. Sally Field's great. But just where she bangs the principal and all this, and young Forrest hears it. And then like the thing with Elvis. Oh, God, I hate this movie.
Kurt Russell dubbing the voice of Elvis, though.
Yeah, that doesn't make it good. I hate this movie.
Well, yeah, and it's so weird where, like, I described this to you, like, we were private messaging, like, after I rewatched it. Like, coming out of, like, being so ingrained in, like, no, this is one of the great movies of all time, it's so great, and, like, everybody loves it. Like, that kind of culture, and then going back to this and watching it, it feels like realizing that, like, I was in a cult. Because it's just like, oh, we all kind of just went along with this. We drank the Kool-Aid. But yeah, like, sky is blue, grass is green, Forrest Gump is one of the great American films. And, like, rewatching it just feels like it's so astonishing that, like, this movie still has, like, a cultural legacy, still has, like, the parodies. Like, we mentioned The Great Escape and how many things parody it. There was a lot of that with Forrest Gump, too. Like, there was so many, like, oh, like, life is like a box of chocolates, all these things, like, permeate throughout the culture.
Run, Forrest, run.
Right, Run, Forrest, Run. A Bubba Gump Shrimp Company you can still eat. At certain locations, like that great awful piece of shit restaurant that makes terrible shrimp at like your local Universal City Walk. All that stuff like is like so ingrained in the culture, yet this is an example unlike The Great Escape, where like you go back to it just like, oh yeah, why did we put this on a pedestal? Why exactly did we do that? And I think it's only because, like, I would say it is one of the definitive movies of the 90s,
yes,
but one of, like, the bad ones, I think, for, like, all of the reasons that, like, make the 90s that weird kind of, like, naive period, in terms of just, like, oh, everything's fine, right? Like, the Cold War's over, we won, baby boomers are great, and everything's gonna be great from now on. Clinton's president, nothing bad's gonna happen after this, right? Nothing bad will happen, to the degree that the sequel was gonna happen. That was gonna based on like the sequel book, but then like they literally like handed it off in like early September 2001. Then 9/11 happened, and like Zemeckis and Hanks and everybody was like, we shouldn't do this. And it does feel like it's one of the premium examples of like a pre 9/11 movie, where it's just like, oh no, everything's gonna be scot-free from now on in the 21st century. All like blue skies, nothing bad's gonna happen.
Everything is great.
Right.
Yep, as long as you live the American way, everything's going to be fine.
It works so far, right? So let's keep doing it.
Let's keep going. This is definitely one of those where I'm like, thank God I never got the sequel. Because even if they would have done it, it would have been a huge movie. I mean, it would have made a ton of money. Would it be as sort of loved and lauded over as this one? Maybe not, but still, it would have been a huge success. You know, it's one of those things where the American people don't need any more dumbing down. We're all pretty fucking stupid, and this movie is just, to me, a pure sort of example of that. We're like, oh, there's things in it I remember. It's good. Shit happens. Oh, that's a bumper sticker. He likes Nikes.
Well, but even removed from that, it feels like it's also just like this weird thing where, despite like some of the satiric intent, it is also just kind of like a, wow, man, we got through so much shit. It feels like a weird victory lap movie. For,
yeah,
like,
it does.
Baby boomers.
Yeah, it really does.
Just,
yeah, it does.
We're just like, man, we went through Vietnam, we went through like segregation, like being abolished and all this other stuff.
Even this guy who's got mental problems and, you know, people have died around him and he's lost everyone in his life. As long as you just stick to the American way and do what you're told, you too can succeed and own a chain of shitty shrimp restaurants and be a millionaire. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You'll be fine.
To the degree that, like, he does the whole speech thing in Washington that, like, gets cut off by the mics or whatever, and he makes Abby Hoffman cry. Like, that's the ultimate, like, weird indictment where it's just like he can make Abby Hoffman cry, but also he can basically foil Nixon by blowing the Watergate scandal open and everything and all this other shit. Like, it just feels like it's, with the historical fiction element of it, it's this, like, parade through, like, American history that is trying to say, like, wow, isn't it weird that all this stuff happened, but also, but isn't it, like, great that we got through it, right? Like, a bunch of our fucking presidents got shot, and, like, John Lennon got shot, and all this other stuff, but we made it out of the woods, guys. And we're all good. And we can retire on our farms, and, oh, our hippie wives might die, but we can keep going, and our sons will keep going. And it's the, you know, the weird, like, patriarchal male tradition continues, even as, like, all that other stuff melts away. It's this movie that, like, is so saccharine, but also incredibly evil if you even scratch a bit underneath the surface. It is kind of an evil movie.
A bit under the surface. A bit. It's like one of those shitty fucking scratch-off lottery tickets you get at your local dive bar that only reward you with, like, drinks at the bar. All it takes is, like, barely the edge of a penny to scratch it. Just a little bit. That's the thing about this movie. That's the thing that sort of, I guess it bothers me about it the most, is because it's so beloved and so beholden and everything. And if you ask anybody, honestly, like, why do you like Forrest Gump so much? I'm just curious. Tom Hanks won the Oscar. Well, yeah, I know that, but why else? What else about it? They were naming off a bunch of shrimp. Okay, cool. Yeah. What else? That wave he does, that's a gif now. Like, shut the fuck up. And I don't mean to really sour on anybody's taste in movies. I really don't.
I mean, it sounded like you were just doing that pretty hardcore.
I am doing,
like
well, no, but the reason I am is because I would never do it with almost any other movie, but this one to me is so bad and offensive and just has just this unrightful place amongst, like, the greatest, like you said, movies of the 90s or even of all time. And I've never heard one logical reason why it's gotten that. I still, to this day, don't get it. Because, like you said, if you take a second and point out and analyze this movie at all, it's fucking wrong. It is a bad, evil, wrong movie that just literally only wants to placate on people's emotions to be as successful as it was. And I don't see anything in this movie worth merit. I still don't. Yeah, you get a couple good acting scenes or whatever, but you could find that in most movies. This is just fucking bullshit. It's just fucking dreck bullshit. 10 out of 10.
This is a great movie, yes. And like, you even like with Hanks, like having like one for Philadelphia the previous year, like if you go back to Philadelphia, it is definitely a movie of its time and has dated elements to it, but you feel its heart is a lot more sincere and has like a true point to it. And you feel like you know, it at least makes sense where it's just like, I get why this was like so sensational at the time and why certain elements might not hold up especially well today, but like there's still a lot of like respectful like beauty and at least attempts at like being very empathetic that it's trying to go for. Versus this movie, like I said, doesn't even have like, it's not empathetic, nor is it like necessarily extremely like angry and dismissive. It's just a total apathy of a movie. which is why it's still so baffling that it has like such a massive success and like has so much love put toward it, because it's a movie that feels like so much colder when you look back at it. I think a lot of what blinded at least me to it is the Hanks of it all, where I think Hanks does such a good job with like the incredibly bizarre weirdness that's like this movie is going for, that like could fall apart at the seams with any other actor. And I think he like makes you go on that whole journey. And at the very least, like, he is consistent enough, even within the confines of, like, this baffling performance that has, like, the awful accent and all these, like, implications about the character and everything. But at the same time, Hanks is too good an actor, you know, for somebody who doesn't want to scratch beyond that surface to even have that investment in doing so. He's kind of like the safeguard for the whole movie. Because, like, anybody who's like, well, maybe if I thought about it for the second, but it's like, oh, but Hanks is being so charming. He's America's dad. I can't do it. And that's, like, the weird thing. I don't think it's, like, Hanks doesn't even, like, when I've seen, like, interviews with him about this movie afterward, he doesn't seem like it's, like, in on, like, the maliciousness of it necessarily. He just, like, is too good and sincere an actor to, like, really make any of that stuff shine as brightly as it really should on anyone else. I think that's just the testament to, like, that guy, where sometimes the power of Hanks can be used, for evil, in this case.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I agree with you. I mean, you know, the thing is, like, yeah, Tom Hanks won Best Actor and won Best Picture and all that, but there's been several times where that's happened to better movies and some lesser movies that don't have nearly sort of the pop culture place that this one does. And that's why I just don't get it. I don't get what it is about this fucking movie that just people are just enamored with and just defend it till the day they die. They'll die on the Forrest Gump hill, and I don't understand it. I never will. Because like I said, I didn't like it when it first came out. But even to this day, I just don't get it. Like, there has been a lot more dissension where people are like, yeah, maybe it's not that fucking good. Or, oh, it's pretty problematic. But there are still those people who are like, the fuck you, Forrest Gump is, oh, it's a fucking treasure. Okay. Well, I just, not for me, I guess. That's the easiest way, in the most unconfrontational way I can put it. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I think I'd also want to give a bit of credit, at least, to Robert Zemeckis, who we've talked about plenty of times on this show, and I think is so, at least at this time, was very good at crafting, like, an incredible sort of, like, you know, blockbuster entertainment from, like, the Back to the Future movies, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, even, like, Death Becomes Her, no matter how weird that movie is. He at least, like, knew how to, like, really try and, like, bring unique special effects and also like a really engaging cast and sort of like some of that satiric bite into this, where like I don't think also if you don't have a Zemeckis, I don't think this would also, specifically at this time, that would nearly work as well. But at the same time, this is also the movie that kind of broke Zemeckis to a certain degree, even though I like Contact and Castaway were like the movies right after this. I think those are both pretty great movies. But it feels like this is a movie where like it's so massively successful and allows him to do like whatever he wants afterward, that it's like, well, I mean, I made this movie that appeased so many people, but then I made like, you know, Contact and Castaway, and people kind of like those, but not nearly as much. Maybe I don't need to deal with people anymore. Maybe I can do creepy motion capture movies, right? And then you'll love me again? And no.
Which we watched, I think, yesterday, if not the day before, fucking Polar Express.
Oh,
good God. I've seen it before, but I hadn't seen it since it came out, so my kid wanted to watch it. That's a terrifying film.
Did she even like it?
She watched it, but she just wanted to watch anything Christmas. So like, we did that, and then I got her to watch Arthur Christmas.
Yeah, way better movie, great movie.
Way better animated Christmas movie. But yeah, no, Polar Express. She was like, it was okay. Yeah, that means you didn't like it. That means it sucked, which it does.
She didn't want any of that hot chocolate.
It's so bad. And by the way, as if Forrest Gump doesn't prove it, Polar Express definitely will. Tom Hanks, no good at accents.
Though we should give credit to the fact that, like, in this movie, the accent is actually based on the kid who plays young Forrest. That's his natural speaking voice. Michael Connor Humphreys.
If I remember right, he went in doing it with his normal voice. Tom
yes,
Hanks
there is footage of that. Like, there is footage of him doing the scene where he discovers Haley Joel in, like, Tom Hanks' voice, and it just feels weird. Even as weird as obviously it is in this movie, it just feels bizarre, which is like, no, this doesn't work. Wait, no. If Hanks used his normal voice, it would, I think, have sank this movie. Even his charms couldn't move past, like, that element of it.
Right.
I think also, that Alan Silvestri score who I love Alan Silvestri in a lot of contexts, but it's maybe the best definition of like a manipulative score for a movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Where it's just like the gliding feather theme and all that stuff.
Yeah, the piano key. Oh god, fuck off.
Oh god, and the needle drops. I forget every time that this movie has like a soundtrack budget that could like fund a small country, basically, because it's just like needle drop after, and it's also a movie that like helped ruin needle drops, because like how many movies after this have done like, especially I mean, this isn't the first movie to do this, but like the credence over Vietnam and shit like that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, that's a guarantee at this point, isn't it? Anytime it's or even just a military helicopter, even if it's not Vietnam, it's usually credence. And I'm so tired of it. I'm so tired, and I love credence, but I'm so tired of that fucking trope.
I don't know. Whenever you see a helicopter land in a military zone, though, you're just like, well, why isn't Fortunate Son playing right now?
Yeah, what
it feels
the
like
hell
it has
is
to
going
happen.
on? But yeah, I'm tired of it, and this movie's really bad at it. I mean, it's not like Suicide Squad bad, but it's bad.
But it's at the same. It's a weird thing where like it originated. I think it feels at least like, or at least it really mass sort of marketed a lot of that kind of stuff that like has been so saccharine now. But unlike a lot of other movies where you go back to sort of the origin point, you're like, oh well, it's so well utilized here. Instead, it's just like, oh no, people just learned all of this movie's bad lessons and repeated them because it was so successful.
Yep, that's exactly right. Fuck you, Zemeckis. Fuck you, buddy. And fuck whatever his name is who wrote this goddamn book.
Well, like I said, I mean, the book at least seems a bit less like saccharine. It's more Eric Roth, I think you have to blame for that, who basically rewrote this movie but put an old boy Brad Pitt in it with a Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Yeah,
like, that movie is so this movie like beat for beat, but at least that movie feels a bit more like dark.
Yeah, because it's weird,
unsettling. Yeah, because it's weird.
Yeah, at least there's something weird about it. Where this is just like, what? They should have had Eric Roberts rewrite it. Then it would have been good. It's a talking cat.
I love you, Lieutenant Dan. Yes, I'm a talking cat, Lieutenant Dan. And my mouth is barely moving.
Let's get some hookers. Okay.
And let's stay at this one house location for the entire 75-minute running time.
Yeah.
Are we done, David Toccato? I want to get out of here into my trailer.
It's just Eric Roberts in a shitty cat costume.
No, that's way too much. Look, I can record lines in my bathroom at 1 a.m, and you can use that.
Don't look at me, Forrest. I can't get hard if you're looking at me. Okay, sorry.
Well, it looks like we've flown way past Forrest Gump here. So, Adam, do you have any other lingering final thoughts of Forrest Gump?
No, it sucks, dude. It's like I said, it's manipulative. It's bullshit. The movie I just literally described would have been a better movie, at least for me. It'd have been hilarious. This I know your name's Forrest Gump. That's but Forrest Hump. But anyway, it's terrible. Like I said, it's emotionally manipulative. Nothing happens. Like, yeah, there's a bunch of series of events that are connected, but at the end of it, what happens? He's got a kid, and Lieutenant Dan's got peg legs or whatever the fuck. Great, cool. Jenny believed in anti-establishment and got AIDS and died because of it. Sweet. Oh, the movie's over because of that fucking feather again? All right, cool. All right. Oh, that kid sees dead people. It is really over. All right. Well, that was a waste of my time, and that's what this movie is. It's so bad. It's so fucking bad. I hate this movie. This to me is one of my least favorite Best Picture winners, if not my least favorite. To be 100% honest, I don't know. Crash is right up there.
I mean, but, Crash is like
pretty. Crash is pretty bad, and The Artist. But this is really fucking bad.
The Artist, I don't think deserves nearly as much hate as either of those movies. It's a fine little movie that just got too much attention.
Yeah, right. That's true. The Artist is not as bad as Crash. But no, this movie just fucking sucks, dude. It fucking sucks. I got nothing for it. I probably, unless I'm forced to for whatever reason, I don't think I will ever watch Forrest Gump again.
It's weird where I don't have like necessarily that nostalgia anymore for it. based on like what we've been talking about here. But at the same time, there is a weird fascination that makes me not necessarily hate Forrest Gump, but be like so intrigued by what it is as a cultural object that I can't like hate it necessarily, but at the same time, I can easily say it does not deserve nearly as much of the success or the acclaim or the cultural relevance that it has. Like, it's more fascinating as like a weird curio of what like a 90s movie is, particularly, where it's just like this weird, like I said, like victory lap movie that like could have only happened and been embraced in like 1994. Like, for all the reasons that we're talking about, it's like such a movie of that specific time that I find it fascinating on that level. And I think certain things, like we mentioned Sinise, I think even Robin Wright we didn't mention a lot of, but despite how much her character gets like just so kicked around brutally, unfairly, I think is doing as much as she can with it. And even Hanks, I think, is like such a good actor that like he can at least work around some of this like awful evil implications of this movie to make a kind of interesting performance, if not necessarily a good one. But overall, yeah, this is still it's an evil movie that I don't think, at least if it does have to have any kind of legacy, it should be just more of like, this is what like the 90s was in terms of like the naivete of it. This is what like the naive sense of just like everything's fine, nothing bad's gonna happen, 21st century's gonna rule, we're gonna have flying cars and bullshit. It's the ultimate example of like that kind of movie where it has bits of that cynicism, but it's so much more about the like, well, all that horrible cynical shit happened, but we made it, everything's good, and everything's great as long as you do what you're told and don't question anything. So, evil, but fascinating nonetheless.
Evil dies tonight.
Look how well that worked out for that movie. Good point.
Yeah.
But now it's time. We did our weekly segment, The Double Redo. Double redo.
Double redo. Double redo. Double redo. Double redo. Double redo.
That works. So the Double Redo is a segment that Adam and I like to do where we bring up a good and a bad movie related to the topic in question. So we bring up as like sort of alternate double feature where it's like, hey, here's a good example of this topic we'd recommend, and here's a bad example that we would steer you clear of. So Adam and I each have a good and a bad one like this, and I'll start here with my good pick is a movie that came out only a couple years ago and feels like it kind of disappeared, which is a shame because I think it's a very fun and also much more inherently cynical and satirical movie called The Death of Stalin, which is basically a historical fiction version of a scenario where like basically Joseph Stalin dies in Russia in 1953, and the people who were following are trying to like basically keep the nation of Russia together while at the same time constantly infighting. And it's an amazing cast where you got like of people who are not doing Russian accents, but just like really genuinely great, funny actors. Where you got Steve Buscemi, Patty Constantine, Jason Isaacs, Michael Palin from Monty Python shows up. Andrea Riseborough is also in there. Like a lot of great people. Jeffrey Tambor's also there. So, you know, a bit squick over there with that necessarily. But at the same time, it's such an interesting movie that it's directed by Armando Iannucci, who's more famous for like doing Veep and The Thick of It, which became like In the Loop, the movie and stuff like that. So he's known for like doing bitter kind of satire, and he does such a great job with this movie where it's all about the weird, dumb infighting that happens where it's like, oh, our great leader died. What the fuck do we do now? Like there's literally like the first, I would say, 15 to 20 minutes of this movie are these guys who were like in Stalin's cabinet discovering he's dead and being like, fuck, God, what do we do? Do we move the body? No, we couldn't move the body. Like everyone can see it. Like what the fuck? God. Like they treat it like it's this like major war castle, even though it's just like a guy died who's also like the lead, like the leader of this country died, and they make it just like this. Oh God, we gotta make this look good for us. Shit, fuck. And it's really funny. So like very satirical, but it feels like it's a movie that really did not get much of a huge release in America, and I wish it kind of did because it has like so many things where like some of it's based on truth, but so much more of it is just like a satirical idea of just like what happens when like in a dictatorship, if this one guy dies, all like the various like vermin are around just like, oh fuck, what do we do? Like who's gonna take power? Who's gonna take control? Do we even say that he's dead or not? And all this other stuff. How do we keep the propaganda machine going? It's like so smart, so fucking funny. And I hope like more people would at least get a chance to see it now, and after me recommending it here. And then my bad one is a movie called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which came out in 2012, and I remember being sort of a weird big deal where it was like a big summer blockbuster, and it was based on a book that had gotten a lot of attention. And the premise sounds cool, where it's like, oh, what if during his time when he wasn't obviously being the president, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, was secretly hunting vampires on the side. Like, that sounds like a fun movie, right? The problem is this movie is so dead serious, and it doesn't have any of like the potential like fun and humor and interest, because it's Timur Bekmambetov did it, and it feels like so overly serious and kind of dull after a certain point. And there's a lot of problems, like Benjamin Walker is the guy who plays Lincoln, and he's kind of dull and boring. There's good people like Anthony Mackie, Dominic Cooper, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who like in theory could like be like fun in a movie like this. But this one is like so deadly serious and has like this big inflated budget with like big CGI like, you know, action sequences that all look terrible at the time in 2012 and still look even worse today. And like it also is like shot so dark. There are like so many scenes where like it is shot at night and you can barely see what the fuck's going on. And it's such a bummer that like this cool idea of just like Abraham Lincoln like fucking fighting vampires at night, a real waste of potential.
Okay, I've never seen Death of Stalin. I've heard of it, but I honestly completely forgot about it. But it's definitely one that I want to watch, and I think my wife would enjoy it too, especially with that cast. And I mean, it's out there. It's easy to find. It's on a free app right now. Uh, so I mean, it's definitely one that I want to check out. And then, yeah, briefly to Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, a fucking terrible film. And like you said, I think what the problem with it is exactly that it takes itself way too seriously. It's not nearly as fun. And think about Timur uh he's made, you know, the Night Watch and the Day Watch movies, which have fun with themselves. They're not great movies, but they're a little bit of they're silly. They're just cool action bits. Crazy that the special effects in those movies are better than the ones in Abraham Lincoln. But those are actually kind of fun, you know. And then even Wanted, which, you know, we've talked about here, yeah, but there's at least points of levity to it. Where Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, it's just, there's nothing. There's nothing. Like you said, it's got a great cast. Not only the people you mentioned, but it's also Jimmy Simpson, and then Martin Soskis, I want to say is his name, as sort of the main one of the main bad vampires. Could be really fun in it and everything, and he actually was okay, kind of creepy and charming. But they give him nothing else to do. It's a really bad fucking movie. It's really bad. And then for mine, I'll do my bad first. I don't know if you've seen it. I know I have. I think it fits the historical fiction thing pretty well. It's a terrible fucking film. It's a big case of whitewashing in Hollywood, which is weird because it was a joint China production. I have the Matt Damon starring Great Wall. Visually, a lot of pretty colors and costumes and things like that. But other than that, it is just a basic, stupid white man savior, run of the mill fucking action movie that's set in feudal China that also has crazy aliens for some reason. It's just there's a lot of people that really existed at the time in the movie, at least the characters and things like that. But it's just holy fuck, is it bad? It is really bad. Talk about one of those that's all style, no substance, and even the style's bad. It's like fucking shitty Jenko jeans you get at Pacific Sunwear. Like it's not good style. It's a lousy movie, and it's a chore to get through. And then for my good, I have a movie that might be a little controversial, just because of this director, and I know a lot of people don't really like this movie. I still think it's a very fun, entertaining movie. Uh, Not great, not like one of the best movies I've ever seen, but anytime I put it on, I have a good time with it. I have Zack Snyder's 300. It is the ultimate sort of male machismo action movie. And plus, you know, if you are a little bisexual, it's fun that way too. I just think it's a super fun movie. I think the action's really fun. I think Gerard Butler, God bless him. I love when Gerard Butler tries to cover up his accent. And this is one of the ones where it's like he's doing an accent, but it's not his normal accent. So it's an accent that belongs nowhere. I really have fun with this one. I even had fun with the sequel, which is not good. But compared to the other Frank Miller graphic novel movies that came out, where you had Sin City, which is great, and its sequel, which is dog shit, I would take these two over it. I think 300 is still a very, very fun movie.
Yeah, I have seen both of these. The Great Wall is, I think, fascinating just because you mentioned kind of briefly that it's a weird example of like Chinese and U.S. like joint production that has like a lot of like Chinese cast members, but also Matt Damon and Willem Dafoe pop up. And Damon is like in such a sleep mode in that movie; he barely is cognizant. And it's directed by and I apologize for mispronouncing this potentially, but Zhang Yimou, who directed a bunch of great Chinese movies, including like Hero and House of Flying Daggers. A dude who knows how to make like a lot of those great big epic, especially like martial arts sort of focused movies. And yeah, his talents are mostly wasted on this movie. With like you mentioned the weird like they're like these weird lizard monsters of some sort that attack. It's very bizarre. That like the weird mythology they're trying to build with that for little result in that. And then 300 is interesting to me where I was out of the country for most of 300's like big theatrical release in the US. And I remember coming back home and everybody was doing like 300, like This Is Sparta, Kicks, and all that other stuff. And I didn't watch it until like it was on DVD. And when I watched it on DVD, I'm just like, I don't know if I really get all the hype behind this. And even I watched it a couple of years ago, kind of removed from that kind of hype element of it. And I find it interesting just in terms of like, it's this very stylistic, like obviously like Zack Snyder-y embracing element of it. But it's also an incredibly fascist work of art. And I don't say that necessarily to say that, like, oh, Zack Snyder's, like, a fascist or whatever shit, but just based on, like, what the actual context of it is, the movie itself is also propaganda. Like, even in context of the movie, it's being told to, like, a group of kids as a way of, like, telling them, like, let's go ride just like, the 300 did back in this olden time with, like, the one guy who's, like, narrating the whole story. Like, it's inherently, like, a weird, like, fascist propaganda movie. But at the same time, it is stylish and has a lot of interesting elements to it, so I don't necessarily like it that much, but it's a curiosity, for sure. But now, let's do let's repeat our titles here for anybody out there, in case you might have missed them, for our historical fiction double redo. My good pick was The Death of Stalin, and my bad pick was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
My good pick was 300, and my bad pick was The Great Wall.
Yeah, so now we'll be winding down the show here, but stay tuned as we'll be doing our picking for next week's episode, so stay tuned for that. But we wanted to thank some people first. Like, we want to thank Chris Oliver for our intro and outro music on the show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thorlally for our artwork. Follow him at Night of Water on various socials. That's night with a K, _of_water. For all sorts of interesting stuff on there, all his great artworks. And, of course, thanks to our supporters on Patreon over at patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, y'all get to do stuff like vote in polls for topics that we do. Like this one with historical fiction. Thanks to all you all, we ended up covering that, and this episode was made possible by you folks. But also, you get to listen to bonus podcasts. Like right now, we just released a bunch of like big bonus stuff on our Patreon with like our top 10 directors. Adam and I went back and forth on that. Had a lot of fun doing it. And then we also had an On the Edge of Relevance that we put up for Avatar: The Way of Water, in which myself and Hayel Peralta, previous guest friend of the show, talked about that movie for about an hour, 40 minutes, full spoilers, deep dive into Avatar: The Way of Water. And also stay tuned, because we might be doing On the Edge of Relevance again, me and Adam, for a certain movie that came out on Netflix this holiday season, Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery.
Yeah.
Yes, and for $1 you get all of that stuff, and we really appreciate all the support we get from patrons out there, and hope, all those of you who aren't patrons can support us and, get some of that stuff, while at the same time helping us out. For more of us, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at DEDBpod, and you can also submit feedback to us, doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And you can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at NotTheWho'sTommy. And I also do some writing on marianithomas.wordpress.com and at film-cred.com, which, just a shout out, I was a guest on a couple podcasts recently. One over on the Film Cred Patreon, the show I produce and edit, Film Cred Review, which is hosted by Hayel. I was a guest on there for this most recent episode, the last episode of 2022, where we both talked about the original Avatar, so it's a good companion piece with our On the Edge of Relevance episode. You can become a patron over there for Film Cred for also just $1, and you get to listen to that and all the other episodes for Film Cred review over there. And also, I was a guest on Real Talk, the movie show, with the host Nick Chandler, where we talked about Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. A lot of fun.
And I haven't been guest spotting anywhere because I'm being antisocial and fuck all of you. But you can find me on Instagram at Atom or Adam. That's ATOM_OR_ADAM. Or you can find me on Letterboxd at Schwanson. That's SCHWANDTSON.
And for more of our audio antics here, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, you might listen to all the other great shows that are on the network. And you can also dig into our archives on our Podbean main feed for like 200 episodes before we even joined Talk Film Society. And anything else, if you can't, help us with the Patreon. That $1 a month can be tight for some people. We get it, totally cool. But it would help if you could do any of these things for free. Just rate, review, or simply share the show around to give us more visibility out there in the weary podcasting world. Help us walk like Forrest Gump throughout the world.
Oh, God. I mean, why did you have to do that? Now I don't have anything to say. You know what? Don't help us, because I don't want to keep propagating Forrest Gump. So delete the apps. Delete all your apps.
Stop listening to podcasts in general, not just ours, but all podcasts.
Get a
just
horse.
Destroy your
Go live in the
podcast.
mountains so you don't bother anybody.
Destroy your phone. Live off the grid.
Yep.
Go to a log cabin. Well, Adam, on that note, it's time we did our picking for next week, which we should mention, this is the last episode of 2022, so we all hope you have a happy and safe New Year's out there.
Happy New Year.
Yes, for sure. But, Adam, even though next week will be 2023, before we can continue with that year, we got to wrap up 2022, as we are wont to do. Where every 6 months, basically, we do like a mid-year check-in for all the movies that came out in 2022, and then near the end of the year, or in this case, the very beginning of the next year, we are doing a wrap-up on 2022, where we're going to talk about 2 movies that came out in the year, and we already know one of those picks, thanks to our patrons, which I'll get to in a second. But for our picking, if you're new, usually Adam and I each come to the table with either 2 good or 2 bad movies. We switch up on the quality for that, and we assign them numbers between 1 and 10. So usually the other person would say, I'm going to pick number 7, and the person who has the either good or bad picks at that time on the other side of things will say, well, that's closest to number 8, which is this particular movie, and thus that gets us our good and our bad pick. But keep in mind, there is the Godfather rule, where Adam and I were given vetoes back in May to use just one single veto for each of us, that, if we hear a choice and we're like, you know what, I don't want to cover this movie, we can say the magic words of, I'll take the cannoli, and thus that choice is gone. We gotta go with whatever other choice is there. I've used my veto already. Adam has his, and he could use it for my good choice for this, but keep in mind that I won't be doing any picking this week because our patrons voted on a poll for our bad pick for this 2022 episode, and we ended up with Moonfall as our bad pick. Roland Emmerich's big old disaster movie, Moonfall, where the moon falls toward the earth. I have seen this movie, and it is interesting. We'll talk about it. But are you excited, Adam, to talk about Moonfall?
I mean, I guess. I haven't watched it yet. I'm expecting about as much fun as I had with fucking Geostorm. So, all right.
But this is Emmerich actually behind the wheel as opposed to his producing buddy. So this is pure Emmerich cheese, which take of that what you will. But now, Adam, I have my 2 good choices here, and I'll say even before you do any picking, these 2 were definitely ones I considered because there's connecting threads to the 2 of them. Being 1, they both star the same actor, who I think has had a very interesting year this year, and 2, they're also both movies I think relate to Adam on various different levels.
So it's like a little Christmas gift for me. Oh, that's nice.
A New Year's gift, I guess, whatever. Ring in the new year with one of these 2 movies. So, for my 2 good choices, Adam, please pick a number between 1 and 10.
Oh, I'll go number 2.
Okay. At number 3, I have a movie that came out back in, I want to say March or April, and I think deserves a lot more attention and it kind of like disappeared in the ether. But it stars one of the guys who's had such a great year this year, Colin Farrell, in After Yang.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've been wanting to watch this.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely gives me a reason. Yeah, okay, cool. I think by elimination, I know what your second pick is, but I am not taking McNulty.
Right, yes. And this one, obviously, because I know you're such a big sci-fi fan, this has a lot of Blade Runner sort of DNA in it that we'll definitely be talking about. But then on the other side of things, over at number 8, I had the one that's probably going to get a lot more Oscar attention, and I get it, because, I mean, it's one of my favorite movies of the year, that stars Farrell and his In Bruges co-star, Brendan Gleeson, in the Martin McDonagh directed, also from In Bruges, Banshees of Inisherin.
Yeah, buddy. I'm actually watching that on Christmas Day. It's on HBO Max now. I can't fucking wait to watch it. It looks so good. It looks so fucking good. A, I love In Bruges. B, I love both of those actors. And C, I don't know if anybody got the from maybe listen to the show. If you have, I'm Irish as fuck, so it's like,
It's a movie about sad Irishmen who drink a lot. So I'm just like,
well, shit, of course. So it's my life. Yeah.
It is the life of your ancestors. It takes place in like the 20s, so it's just like, this is Adam's like grandfather is one of these people, I'm sure.
It's my pop.
Whichever. Yeah, so After Yang and Moonfall, 2 sci-fi films from 2022 of very different stripes.
I'm good with you ending the year on sci-fi.
Well, beginning the year on sci-fi. So we're ending 2022 and ringing 2023 next week. But until then, everybody, life is like a box of chocolates in terms of sometimes you get really good ones and then you get like really bad ones.
Yeah, it's the ones that are filled with like the cherry or like the shitty jelly. Like nobody wants that, or coconut. Oh God.